Hey dear, Zimzi here to talk about the latest chapter of Hunter x Hunter, and bear in mind, this is not a spoiler-free discussion, and this particular chapter gets dark, so proceed at your own risk. So in this chapter we find out that Sarasa is no longer alive. She was chopped up into pieces and put in a bag and strung up in the forest, and it's Chrollo who volunteers to open up the bag to see what was inside. And I think that kind of really shows who he is as a person. He's kind of like this martyr type. He takes responsibility. Like, he blames himself for letting Sarasa walk home alone, knowing that there's been all these child abductions going on. And we see that behavior still now with Chrollo, where he wants to track down and kill Hisoka because he blamed himself for Kortepe and Shalnark's death because he borrowed their abilities, leaving them kind of vulnerable and defenseless. And there's this conversation that I believe occurred shortly before Shalnark died, where Chrollo's like, hey, do you want your manipulation, I think it's like Black Voice ability back or something? And Shalnark's like, oh, I don't need it right now. And then Chrollo says that, okay, I'll just give it to you on the boat. But of course, Shalnark doesn't make it to the boat. He's offed by Hisoka. But even though Shalnark kind of said that he didn't need his ability at that time, I think regardless, Chrollo is going to blame himself as the leader of the troop for not really pushing giving Shalnark's ability back. And he was probably the one who had the idea in the first place, using the other troops' abilities and kind of cheating against Hisoka. Yeah, so he feels really guilty aboard the boat right now, and I think it's kind of sad but funny, but Shizuku makes a remark like, oh, your book is like the Death Note. And Chrollo's just silent because I think that hits him where it hurts. I think it's pretty safe to say that Sarasa's death deeply impacted Chrollo. It psychologically scarred him for life. Like, he was only 11 years old when he found his friend chopped up, and he was also intelligent enough to realize what happened to her, so her death, her torture was recorded, and he's intelligent enough also to anticipate the coming of the clear web, like lightning fast information being processed, and he anticipates that these types of videos will be uploaded onto the internet for others' sick entertainment. And he also kind of plans to create a dark web, a honeypot to entice criminals into bragging about their kills, divulging information so that he can catch them. It's like To Catch a Predator almost. So Chrollo's like, I'm going to become the villain that the world fears so that they never do this to another Meteor City child again, because the justice system doesn't recognize them as existing as human, so they aren't going to charge criminals for victims that supposedly don't exist. So essentially, Frollo kind of becomes a anti-hero. And there is one wholesome thing I do want to point out that happened in this chapter, and that is the interaction between Renko and Machi. And Renko is a Nen user who specializes in embalming, and she was the one who cleaned up Sarasa's body and made her presentable for the funeral. And she's the one who inspired Machi. Like, Machi was able to detect her glowing aura, and she's like, hey, why were you glowing? And Renko recognized that Machi was able to see Nen, so she offered her to seek her out in the future. And I believe Renko eventually does become Machi's teacher, because we see that Machi later in the timeline, she does try to thank Hisoka by patching his body up, only he's not dead. And he betrays her, which really sucks because I think Machi's a sweetheart. And then this chapter ends with a callback. Basically, it's Chrollo coming back 3 years after Sarasa's death to announce the creation of the Phantom Troupe, the Spiders. And that's why originally In the flashback in the Yorknu arc, Machi and Pakumoto's like, wait, that's Chrollo? Because he's dressed in all black, he's now emo, he's no longer this smiling child. And I believe maybe during that time, Chrollo might have also learned how to use Nen. Like, he probably is starting to pick up on, like, maybe people have superpowers that I can use to help Meteor City. Yeah, overall, I've been really happy and sad to be getting these flashbacks of the Phantom Troupe. I feel like we are building up conflict between Seri and the Phantom Troupe. I know Nobunaga is saying, like, oh, I think if we kill Morena, the fourth prince will reward us and be happy, but no, I feel like fundamentally Chrollo is going to hate Seri as a person because he loves to torture people and views people as inhuman unless they're like royalty or understand philosophy. So I feel like we are setting up for conflict between the two of them, and it's going to be interesting to see the two duke them out. And don't get me wrong, I love Seri as a character, but he's kind of like Griffith or Kenjaku, where they're terrible people. I love them, and I will also enjoy seeing them be beat up because they deserve it and it's gonna be satisfying. So yeah, interesting things ahead. Let me know what you thought of this chapter. Yeah. Thank you for watching.